Hello everyone, welcome to Study Capital YouTube platform. So in this video, we are going to discuss CUET MA English 2024 PG entrance examination syllabus, important book recommendations, pattern and everything that is related to that. Okay, so before going into this video, I would give you my little introduction. Myself, Atul Mishra, and I have completed my graduation from Banaras Hindu University, post-graduation from Banaras Hindu University, and I'm currently a research scholar in the Department of English, BHU. I have worked here from last 3 years, from 2022 to 2023. I was also working as a teaching assistant at Institute of Agriculture, BHU, and I've also worked as a content creator at Exam.Lib. I have qualified UGC NET JRF as well as GATE entrance examination. And in 2020 CUCT entrance examination, my rank was 1. Okay, so going into what we are, the thing that we are here, the first thing that we would like to discuss is exam pattern. So exam pattern for CUCT 2022 would be, there will be 100 questions in your examination, like the previous examinations that were held from 2021. 25 questions will be there in part A, and for part B there will be 75 questions. In part A, they will mainly ask questions based on general awareness, mathematical aptitude, analytical skills, English grammar, etc. And in part B, in CUCT MA English entrance examination, obviously, so questions from the subject domain, that is English for all of you. And each correct answer will give you 4 marks, while each wrong answer will deduct 1 mark. That means there is 1 minus 1 negative marking. Now, part B. As you know, part A is for mathematical aptitude, general awareness, and so on and so forth. Part B is something which is related to your syllabus, which is related to your subject, that is English. So in part B, they will ask, the very first unit is history of British English literature. When you think of history of English literature, you think of mainly history of British English literature. That is a very vast range, right? Like Anglo-Saxon, Anglo-Norman. Then we have, when you enter into Chaucer period, Elizabethan period, and so on and so forth. So every age is divided into certain period. Some ages were named after a prominent writer that was there, or prominent king or queen that was ruling over that time, or the characteristics, some of the important movements that were going on. For example, Romanticism, or neoclassical period. So this is what history of British English literature. Then the second unit is Indian writing in English. In the same way, like the way certain time periods were divided in British English period, Indian English writing is also been divided into certain periods. The Renaissance period, the Gandhian period, in 1913 when writers like Raja Rao, Mulk Raj Anand, and they were writing. And then in after post-independence, 1950s and 60s, Anita Desai, 1970s, and then Salman Rushdie and others, they were writing. So there is a great development that you will find in Indian writing, from talking about social issues that were there, to the Indian sensibility, the magic realism, so on and so forth. That is a great development that took place even in Indian writing in English. That is the second unit that you have to prepare. Yes. The third unit is literary terms and techniques. There are so many questions that were being asked in past entrance examination related to some of the figure of speech, the techniques that were used by writers while writing, and things that are related to movements and all. That is a part of literary terms and techniques. We will be discussing that later. The fourth unit is literary genres. This is added in 2021 CUCT syllabus. Mainly, they will ask you questions related to genres, the history of genres, be it drama, be it comedy, be it poetry, life writing. These kind of things are given by them in literary genres. Then you have comparative literature and translation study. So many questions from these units, because people are in doubt whether what kind of questions they are going to ask, because this is something which is very new. Mainly in so many universities, they are not teaching what is translation studies, what is comparative literature. But when we'll go into studies, we'll come to know that there's a translation turn, or you can say cultural turn that took place somewhere around 1970s. And after that, translation became very important thing, and we not only cultures has been translated from writers from one culture to another, but so many translations also help people to navigate with different cultures. So that is why after 1970s, translation studies became very important, uh, you know topic altogether, and they are asking questions from basic history. What is translation? Writers like Dryden, writers like Pope, how they were doing translations during 16th century, 17th century, 18th century, the development of translation, and what is the scenario of translation at present time frame. It is related to comparative literature, because mainly in comparative literature, what you do, you compare literature from two different languages or three different languages. So it is a part of translation studies as well. There are emerging fields you might be knowing about, travel literature and others. They all are part of this particular unit. Then we have literary criticism. There are writers from Plato to T.S. Eliot, and they all were telling us how to study a text. There's a very famous thing that were, rules and regulations were given by writers from Plato to Aristotle to Longinus, Horace, and then when you enter into the time frame of Renaissance, people like Philip Sidney. Then in neoclassical time frame, you have writers like Dryden, Alexander Pope later on, and even in the romantic time frame, you will get writers like Keats, Byron. They all are telling us how to read a text, right? Certain rules, and for example, legislative criticism talks about certain rules, the concept of unity of action, unity of time, unity of place. There are so many rules and regulations that are given by writers. Concepts such as Matthew Arnold came up with a theory called touchstone method. Keats came up with the concept of negative capability, and these are certain things that they have provided how to go through a text and how to read a text, which is all a part of this unit called literary criticism. Then literary theory. So many people have doubt in literary theory as well, because when you read criticism, you read from Plato to T.S. Eliot. But T.S. Eliot, is like a bridge between literary criticism and literary theory. For criticism, you need a text, but for theory, you don't even need a text. They can be applied to different texts altogether. Feminism, psychoanalysis, eco-criticism, right? You might be knowing about a little bit about these things. So, for example, in 1910 around, right? Formalism came into being, looking into the form of the text. New criticism, for that matter. 1920s in Britain, 1940s in America. That was the time frame when it emerged, right? Structuralism. Structuralism came in 1910, somewhere around 1910, 1920, when Shashore was writing, basically was giving lectures in 1916, a very famous book. That is how structuralism came into being. Post-structuralism, or as we call it as deconstruction, Derrida started giving lectures, the 1966 lecture at Hopkins University, for that matter, structure, sign and play. That is how post-structuralism came into being. So there are so many theories, and there is certain differences between these theories, that there's a development, a particular structure that you have to follow in order to read what is literary theory. And this is very important, because nowadays they are not only asking questions from literary theory, but also from cultural studies. How writers like Raymond Williams, Hogarth, Stuart Hall, and what is the role of these writers? What are they writing? What are the concepts that are coming from these writers? They all combined into literary theory, especially in syllabus that was provided by CUET. They have given certain names, like feminism is one of them. Psychoanalysis is another. Archetypal criticism, it was not given in the syllabus, but they have asked questions from archetypal criticism as well, right? In the last 2 years, they have asked questions from there as well. Then the next unit is awareness of current literary trends, events, awards, etc. This is again a very important unit altogether, because in last entrance examination, they have asked around 6 to 7 questions from this particular unit, ranging from Booker Prize to Nobel Prize to Sahitya Academy Prize to Gyanpith Award. So many questions they have asked from the awards and also from the literary trends. Like I can think of this one question that they have asked in last entrance examination related to graphic novels. So that is also a very important unit for preparation. Now I would discuss some important topics to focus, because they're asking that it's a very large syllabus, so many units that we have discussed in this video. What are the topics that they're asking? They're asking from last 5 to 6 years. When you go through these question papers, you would get that the first unit is basically waves of feminism. Feminism came into being with Mary Wollstonecraft's very famous 1792 book, right? Vindication of Rights of Women. And after that, that was the first movement when people started talking about, okay, there is a need to talk about the right of women. After that, we have Stuart Mill, and then this became a movement in 1830s, and after that, the first wave was launched. It was launched in somewhere around 1830s, and it ranged from there to 1920, when suffrage movement was basically launched. People, women were given right of vote in 1920s America, and that is our first wave, completed. But there is a second wave of feminism as well. So there is a very dark question that is hidden somewhere, why there was a need for launching the second wave feminism, and especially the third wave feminism as well, right? Second wave feminism talk about the sisterhood concept, and then the third wave talked about the intersectionality, about different things like caste, class, gender, and so on and so forth. We do have fourth wave feminism as well, living in the post global world, the internet and all those things. You will come to know that there is something called fourth wave of feminism as well, thinking of Me Too movement that happened few years back, very recently. So they have asked so many questions from feminism as well. Eco-criticism, eco-feminism is also one of the factors. The second thing is Marxist concept, such as hegemony, such as identity, RSA, repressive state apparatus, ISA, ideological state apparatus. If you have read Karl Marx, for that matter, Althusser, Adorno, these are some of the Marxist writers. Even we have some neo-Marxists as well, right? So Marxism, neo-Marxism, new left, these are some of the units that you will find in Marxism. And Marxist writers have talked about the exploitation of working class people. That is the base of Marxism, right? And in Marxism, you will get writers like who talked about hegemony, identity, repressive state operators, ideological state operators, interpellation, and there are others such concepts as well, and they're asking questions from here as well in your examination. Then we have post-colonial authors, their works and concept. That is basically word literature, because in post-colonial you have not only Indian literature but also Caribbean literature, Nigerian literature, Australian literature, and they're asking questions from this unit as well. So many questions basically from Chinua Achebe I can think of, from Adichie I can think of, from Thiong'o, so many writers, and they're asking questions from the works that they have written, the concept. For example, Edward Said came up with the concept of us other mentality. Writers like Kipling, who started talking about white man's burden, the identity crisis. So many, in post-colonial, there are terms which are related to the exploitation of the colonial people. So colonial and colonized, right? So the West have colonized the East, and you will get to know about so many politics that were taking place during the time frame. So this is the part of post-colonial authors. And you would, why I have written word literature, because in post-colonial, they have also engaged with writers like, from Australian literature, from for example Canadian literature, Margaret Atwood. They have asked questions from Margaret Atwood in last 2-3 years, repeatedly. So these writers are also very important. Then the third important fourth important topic that you need to focus is on legislative criticism. Legislative criticism simply means when you are going to read a text, there are certain rules, certain regulations, and when you're writing a text as well, you have to write it with certain rules and regulations. And these rules were formed from the beginning, like from Plato to Aristotle to Longinus, Horace, and it was followed by people like Ben Jonson, people like Philip Sidney. T.S. Eliot, Matthew Arnold, they all have followed legislative criticism, how to read a text, what to write, how to write, and these kind of things they have propounded. They have propounded certain theories that we will be discussing in this important point. These are also very important points to hold on. Then ecofeminism and eco-criticism. As I've mentioned, eco-criticism is important when talking about the nature, the problems that we are facing recently. They have asked question from J.J. Ballard. J.J. Ballard is a post-apocalyptic writer writing about the crisis, right? Taking into consideration of 2050 America, 2050 Britain, and talking about how the world will vanish because of the things that are happening in our surrounding. So talking about nature also became very important. And why I have mentioned ecofeminism as well, because there are certain writers who have said that not only the exploitation of women was done by male, but the exploitation of nature was also done by male. So that is how they have started repulsing these notions as well, to throw out patriarchy, and that is how you will throw out the exploitation that is taking place. So this is also, in that sense, they are asking basic questions. They're not going into depth, but they're asking basic questions from eco-criticism and eco-feminism. Then there is archetypal criticism. As I have mentioned, people like Fry, and they have asked questions from Fry. Maud Bodkin, Maud Bodkin came up with a work where she talked about the mythical structure in poetry, and they have asked questions from these writers as well. Simply the works that they have written, or if there is some any concept related to them, they have asked in their examination. Then metaphysical poetry. This is again, when we go into genres, different genres, they ask about how how poetry has been evolving throughout. Like when you think of modernism, for that matter, when we are entering into modern period, how there are certain pillars of faith, and they all were being shaken during the time of modernism. That is how we enter into the modern period. First, the reliance on God was shaken, then the reliance on king because of the Marxism was shaken, then the reliance on democracy because of the First World War, because of the Second World War, and then also reliance upon ourselves because of psychoanalysis. Sigmund Freud came up with the theory called came up with the concept called unconscious, and where he said we only know 10% about ourselves, and everything else is a part of unconscious. So we have seen how people enter into the 20th century with this kind of fragmentation, and that is very much visible in the poetry. From decadent of 1890s to 1910s imagism, to 1920s lost generation, to 1930s Auden group poetry, 1940s apocalyptic poetry, 1950s confessional poetry, so on and so forth. You would come to know that these kind of fragmentations, the absurdity that was there, was represented by these writers. Mainly they have asked questions related to which group was working in which period, or for that matter which group of writers is associated with which kind of group. These kind of questions they have asked, but in order to understand that, you need to understand the time frame, the sequence in which these writers were writing. What is the certain characteristics that define the period, that define the drama, poetry, novel, or any kind of artistic activity that was prepared during that time frame. And that is why during the time frame of Jacobean period, you would come to know that metaphysical poetry writers like John Donne, and they were writing poems from John Donne, poems from Marlowe, and they have asked directly lines from metaphysical poetry, asking for the writer or for the themes that were there. Then the next point that is important for your examination is chronology of literary theory. Recently they have introduced literary theory. So as I have told you, there is a structure that you have to follow in order to understand what is literary theory. There is formalism, then there is new criticism. New criticism in Britain came in 1920. New criticism in America came in 1940, especially in 1941 when Ransom came up with a book called New Criticism, from where this theory got its name. Then you have structuralism in 1910-20s, 1960s. You have post-structuralism. That is also the time frame when reader response theory was there. You might be knowing about the book called Death of an Author, where Foucault said death of an author should be considered as a birth of a reader. So many factors that were there, right? Then you have psychoanalysis, Marxism, feminism. They are all part of this literary theory portion. And in last examination they have asked questions from the time frame, right? Given the chronology, and you have to you have to arrange them according to the time frame. This is also a kind of question that they are asking. Then time period of ages, very simply, if you're reading English literature, you should know, how which period is considered as what, and then the time frame of the period. Like, so certain, we have certain ages and they are named after certain writers, certain king or queen that were ruling over that time frame, or the movement, literary movement that was taking place. So certain time frame was given to it, and that is what we call ages. So from Anglo-Saxon to Anglo-Norman to Middle English period, Chaucer period, then Renaissance, from Renaissance to Jacobean period, so on and so forth. There are so many ages, and specific time frame is also something which is important. So many people they are confused between the time frame of Victorian period, for that matter, right? In so many books also you will find that the time frame was given as 1832 to 1901, which is wrong, because 1837 was the time frame when Queen Victoria started ruling over the throne, and from 1837 to 1901, when she died, that period ended. So that is also very important to understand the time frame of ages. They are asking questions directly from last 5 to 10 years. In BHU entrance examination you will get those questions, and in CUET from last 3 to 4 years they are asking these types of questions as well. Then lines from famous poems, like as I've mentioned about Donne, T.S. Eliot, modern poets like Ezra Pound and others. These writers, what they are doing, W.B. Yeats, they're asking, they're quoting lines from the poems that they have written, and they're asking from which poetry these lines are coming. So this is also important to remember the canonical poems that were written throughout history. Then again, prosody. Prosody means simply rhyme, rhythm, meter, stanza form, and they have asked questions from which, what is the rhyme scheme of the poem, for that matter, in comprehension, or the meter in which the poetry is written, rhythm that is used by the writer, blank verse or free verse, and that regulating asking questions from this unit as well. Then they have asked questions from history of translation and comparative literature. As I've told you as well, that this is a very new unit that they have added in the last year, and as we can see the question paper, they have asked questions from the history of translation studies. What is translation, how it began, how in different ages writers were translating, what were the parameters of translation, how in 1970s there is a translation turn in cultural studies, or cultural turn in translation studies, for that matter. Susan Besnet came up with a very famous essay where she talked about the development of translation studies. Same goes with comparative literature. You have certain writers who have used different techniques, reading into different languages and comparing and contrasting the text. That is a part of comparative literature. Now, major areas that you can focus for your entrance examination. The first area would be literary movements and clubs. Throughout history, from the age of Chaucer, you will get to know that there are so many movements, so many clubs that were formed, right? I can think of movements from the beginning of 1380s, when Lollard movement came into being, right? The time frame was dominated by Roman Catholicism and there was corruption. So Lollard movement began, and people like Wycliffe, they have started revolting against that corruption that was taking place. That is the first movement in history that you read. There are other movements as well. Magna Carta was signed in 1215. Before that, 1066, there is a Norman conquest, and these are important things, important dates that they have asked in examination. But from last 2 to 3 years, not only in PG entrance examination but also in NET examination, they are asking questions from the modern period, from the postmodern period as well, 1940s, 1950s, and then what are the movements that are there, what are the not only movements from the groups of poetry but drama, theater of absurd, for that matter, or the confessional poetry. They're asking questions which is not from these particular movement. This is a kind of question that they have asked. So literary movements, clubs, the historical significance of every age, what are the certain characteristics of Chaucer age, for that matter, right? There is a bubonic plague that came, there is a Black Death, there is a Taylor's Rebellion, right? In same way, when you go into the time frame after Chaucer, from 1400 to 1558, this is the darkest period, right? In that period you will find 1455 to 1485 there is a war of roses. 1476 Caxton introduced the printing press, and so on and so forth. 1453 is again very important date because Constantinople fall took place, and that is how Renaissance began. So there are certain movements, clubs as well, like Kit Kat Club I can think of, Scribbles Club, and the members of these clubs, right, who is participating, the very canonical writers, and they are part of the clubs as well, literary clubs as well. Then the second important area to focus is major works and their dates from canonical writers from British literature, right? In British literature, you'll find writers like Dryden, T.S. Eliot, William Shakespeare, Matthew Arnold. These are the canonical writers, right? If you might have read about Harold Bloom's work where he talks about the canon writers. There are 26 writers who formed the canon of British literature, and following that they're asking questions about important writers, mainly their works, directly questions which work is written by which writer or in which year this work was published, like in 2020 entrance examination, BHU entrance examination, they have asked about elegy written in country churchyard, the year in which it was published, right, 1751. Or for example, Utopia was published in 1516 in Latin language and in 1551 in English. It was translated by Rolf Robinson, and these are some of the questions that they have asked in examination. Questions from Horace Walpole, questions from for example, the important year in the life of John Keats, 1819, and the poem, the poem The Second Coming, which was published in the Dial magazine in 1919. There are so many questions that they have asked from important dates, and as I've mentioned, dates are important from the beginning itself, right? From 1066 to 1215 to 1349, 1381, 1453, 1476, 1516, 1558. These are some of the important dates, and you will find that around 50 to 60 dates from historical significance, they are important, and when you will read them in chronological order, it's very easy, it's not difficult, but you need to understand history from the structural point of view. So they're asking questions from works from the main writers. Again, I'm telling you, canonical writers. When I say canonical, that means when you think of a particular age, what kind of writers comes into your mind. Like for example, if you think of Renaissance period, probably Spencer, Sidney, Shakespeare, Marlowe, these are some of the writers that will come into your mind, and they're asking questions from the important works that they have written, mainly which work was written by whom, and if that is important, then in which year they were published, right? Then concepts, works, and their dates from literary and cultural theorists and critics. Like writers, in the same way, which work was written by literary theorists, what concepts were given by those theorists, and the year as well. Like Edward Said's book, they have asked so many times about Edward Said's Orientalism, in which year it was published. I think it's 1978 if I'm not wrong, right? So concepts, which concept is given by which writer, like interpolation, hegemony, as we were discussing in Marxism. So not only in Marxism but in feminism, écriture feminine for that matter, or who coined the term gynocriticism, in which year it was published. So these are some of the important questions that these writers are these examinations are asking. Then genre history and evolution, as I have mentioned, about drama, about comedy, about novel, about poetry. So they have their time frame, they have their roots. So when you think of drama, you would think of the legislative drama that were there, the morality play, the mystery play, the miracle play for that matter, then the Renaissance period, and then how there was a downfall of drama after Shakespeare to the time frame of Ben Jonson, and then how is revolutionized. In 1737 there was a licensing act, and people have turned from drama to writing novels. That is how novel came into being in 18th century. That was also the time frame when periodicals came into being. The Review in 1709, then the Detler, the Spectator, writers like Steele, writers like Edison, they were introducing these things, and the club culture began to emerge. So then there are multiple forms of novel. What is picaresque novel for that matter? What is epistolary novel, Gothic novel, the Bildungsroman, right? So they are asking questions from which particular work, particular work is from which particular genre, and also the development of genre. You think of theater of absurd in 1950s, but how come this absurdity came, right? So the history of that particular thing, the history of drama, life writing, uh, periodicals, essay, that is also one of the areas that they are focusing. Then awards, as I have mentioned in last year examination, they have asked question from recent Booker Prize, recent Nobel Prize, recent Gyanpith Award, as well as Sahitya Academy Award. So this is also an area where they are focusing main, because they are also part of canonical, uh, they are also part of canon, because obviously they're getting some prestigious awards. So Booker Award, right? Twice Booker Award writers. There we have 6 writers who have awarded with Booker Prize twice, for that matter. Nobel Prize, first writer to win Nobel Award, first writer to win Sahitya Academy Award, or 2022 Sahitya Academy winner, 2023 Sahitya, Booker Prize winner. These are some of the questions that they have asked in recent examination. Then movie adaptations and retellings. This is also an important area from the mainstream writers, be it Hardy, be it G.B. Shaw, be it Shakespeare, or any other writer for that matter. There are so many movie adaptations that are taking place in the recent time frame, and they have asked questions from movie adaptations as well as from the retellings of important works, like retellings of Mahabharata, retelling of Ramayana. This is also one very important area to focus. Now another thing is Indian mainstream novelist. Like in 1930, when you think of novel, you think of three pillars of novel in Indian history. Now we have Raja Rao, we have Mulk Raj Anand, right? We have people like who have written about these things, the social problems that were there. Then when you will think of after post independence, we have writers like Anita Desai, her daughter Kiran Desai. In 2006, it was awarded, her novel was awarded with a Booker Prize. And then in 1970, you have Salman Rushdie, and there are other writers who are writing novels in India using magic realism, for that matter. So this is also an area where they are focusing. Important poets from India, Nizam Ezekiel, Sarojini Naidu, Toru Datta, or for example, dramatists. Drama is also very important. Recently they are asking questions from Indian drama, not only from English Indian drama, but drama that were written in Hindi language, and people like Tendulkar and others, they were writing, and then they were also translated into English language. So who translated those texts? This is also an important question, an area which you have to focus on, because they are asking question from this unit as well. Now what kind of questions that they are asking in your examination, right? The first one is obviously the comprehension. In last examination, which was taken by NTS UCET, in which there are two comprehensions, one in part A and another was in part B. The level of comprehension was okayish, because they are asking questions from the there was one passage related to AI, and you have to comprehend it in order to understand what they're asking, and the questions were very literal in the part B comprehension, although part A one was a little bit difficult, but you have to comprehend it in order to understand. Second type of question is match the following. Like they will give you four characters and then the works that from where they are coming, or for example the concept, which writer propounded those concept, movements, people who are associated with those movements, works, who wrote those works, and also with the figure of speech. In last examination they have given definition of four different figure of speech, and they have asked you to match the following. Then the next type of question is assertion reason type. Now there are so many people who are in doubt and they commit mistake in this particular type of questions, because mainly what they will do, they will define a certain concept and in the assertion, and then they will explain it in the reason. Or for example, there was one question that I can think of where in the first part of it they have given in assertion they have given the point which was related to English introduction in India, and then they have defined it and given example in the reason. So you have to be very specific about it, about the definitions of the movements, what kind of people they are associated with, and also the time frame, because they will propound. So not just grabbing out everything, but to understand, and that is how you will understand assertion and reason type questions. Then Next type of question is who introduced which concept and where, right? So who introduced which concept, where means in which work, and also such as touchstone method. So touchstone method was propounded by Matthew Arnold, right? Negative capability was a concept which was derived by John Keats. They have also asked the example that was given by Keats, right? Shakespeare as a great example of negative capability. So that is one thing. Then author, book name from canon, very direct question. They will provide you with the name of the book and they will ask you about the author. Odd one out was also one question that they have asked, and in the last examination they have given three writers who are part of structuralism, and the last one was from post structuralism. So you have to make sure from where these are coming. They can also frame it in a different manner, but in last examination they have asked questions from where they are asking questions from theorists. So which theories belong to which theory, and that is how you have to eliminate them. Then now we'll be discussing about book suggestions from every unit. So the very first unit is also is history of British English literature. So many people are confused from where to begin. So it depends upon your level, from basic from where you are reading. So if you are a beginner, you should go with William J. Long's English literature book, and if you have a basic idea about what is British literature, or for that matter about the ages, certain characteristics, or what kind of literature was written during that time frame. Personally, this routledge is very beautifully written in terms of language. In terms of content, you will find David Deshe is a full of content. You will find two different books for David Deshe. The anthology that is by Oxford, and obviously Edward Elbert. I would suggest you to go with Routledge. It's a very nice book for British literature. Then for Indian writing in English, this Iyengar's book, Introduction to the Study of English Literature, but it's a very vast book, somewhere around 800 to 900 pages. So it's almost very difficult to read that book. But from last few examination, not only in CUET PG entrance examination, but also in UGC NET examination, there are direct questions from Mehrotra's book, Arvind Krishna Mehrotra's A Concise History of Indian Literature in English, and they're asking questions directly from that particular book. You can also go with A History of Indian English Literature by M.K. Naik. It's written in a very basic manner. Then for literary terms, anyone who is reading literature and is a student of English literature, English honors, he should be reading M.H. Ibrahim's, right? M.H. Ibrahim is a book which everyone should carry with them and read every day. This is a very important book for your examination. It will provide you not only with the information related to figure of speech, related to the techniques, related to the style of writing, but you will also come to know that it is directly related to history of British English literature. So if you have read this book, it would be easy for you to understand what is British history. So they are related to each other, certain points and techniques that are used by writers and everything that is related to it. You can also use this Penguin edition of literary terms and literary theory. It is also a okay book. Then for the word literature, this is a book by Prem Shankar Pandey. Mainly is an anthology where he have talked about he has given a kind of summary to all the writers, not only from the British literature but from Indian literature, from German literature, from Caribbean literature, literary theory. Everything is a part of. It's somewhere around 750 page book, and it's a very important anthology for your examination. Now, in word literature, you can go through Caribbean, Australian, American. Last year, they have asked no question from American literature, but there are some American literature writers who are part of comparative literature. So, not in this year, but they may ask you in future. So, certain writers from here are also important. Emerson, Walt Whitman, Mark Twain, and others. Afro-American writers, German literature, and you can use this book for that reason. Now for criticism, as I've told you, there are from Plato to T.S. Eliot. There are range of writers that you have to follow. I can name them, some of them for you, like Plato, Aristotle, Longinus, Horace. These are the writers from the Greco-Roman time frame. Then Philip Sidney, then Ben Jonson, When you enter into the neoclassical period, there is John Dryden, in also Alexander Pope. Then Samuel Johnson, 1755 for that matter, the very important dictionary that he came up with. 1765, the preface to Shakespeare. 1779 to 1781, there is a book that he has written, Lives of Most Eminent Poets, which is a collection of 52 writers' biography, and they have asked questions directly from that part as well. Then Romanticism, writers like Wordsworth, preface to Lyrical Ballad, Coleridge, the Biographia Literaria, right, published in 1817, and they have asked this year as well in your examination. That after that, you have writers like Matthew Arnold, who was writing during the time frame of Victorian age, I.A. Richards, F.R. Lewis, T.S. Eliot. This is a syllabus of literary criticism. You can follow Roy and Dwivedi, and you can also follow Habib. Habib is a very big book, so you can go with Roy and Dwivedi as well, History of Literary Criticism. Now, for literary theory, right? Wait a second. Yes, for literary theory, you can, if you are a basic, beginner, you should go with Peter Berry. It's a very basic book. Again, I'm telling you, to understand literary theory, you need to understand it chronologically. Otherwise, there will be so many confusions. Structuralism or new criticism or formalism, they are interconnected with each other. So which writer belong to which theory is also something that is important to understand. Concepts are from which concept is coming from which particular theory, and what is the idea that were propounded by literary theorists in certain literary theories. Like for example, what is structuralism? What are certain concepts that we find in structuralism? Writer like Saussure, Louis Strauss, what they are doing in post-structuralism, how they are different from structuralism. What is some new that Derrida is coming with? What are the concepts that are provided by Derrida for that matter? Foucault, how is different from post-structuralist writers and coming into new historicism. So they are very important, and you can go with beginning theory by Peter Berry, or for example P.K. Nair, who is also a professor in University of Hyderabad, and you can read his book, this Contemporary Literary and Cultural Theory, very basically written, and from last few examination they are asking questions from here as well. You can also go with Kalyani Weller's What About Theory. This is written in a very playful manner, and very nicely she has propounded some of the concepts, defined concept, and you can go with that book as well. Now, not only books, but you can follow throughout your journey of preparation for BHU, or DU or JNU entrance examination. You can use certain other sources as well. Poetry Foundation. There are so many poems that are uploaded there, and you can read poems from Poetry Foundation. You can read summaries of famous texts from Lit Chart, from Spark Notes, or from Britannica. It's not possible to read every text, right? But for your examination, you need to remember stories from some works. And in that matter, Lit Chart, Spark Notes, and Britannica will help you. Wikipedia, a very important source. Why? Because I'm looking into some of the questions that they are asking from last few examination, and from minor works of the major writers, they are asking questions directly from what is there in Wikipedia. The see also thing, or for example adaptation, that you will find in every works in Wikipedia pages, and they're important sources, and they're asking questions from Wikipedia as well. So for every writer, for every concept, you should also go through Wikipedia to understand what the writer is trying to say. YouTube, again, there are so many channels, so many videos that are there on YouTube. You can also go through YouTube for understanding some of the topics. Now as you are on Study Capital platform, there is one batch that we are also running, and the registration has begun. So what we are going to provide is basically there will be everyday classes from October to July till your examination is over. Every day 1 hour or 1 hour and 30-minute class. The recordings will be provided. There are also Sunday tests, notes in PDF forms, previous year question papers with solution, and then there are doubt sessions as well. So this is all about that we are discussing, from syllabus to pattern to what kind of questions that they are asked. So for registration, the numbers are provided below, so you can contact and read. Okay, best of luck.